All right, everybody, welcome back to Skywatchers Radio right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network and, of course, PSN Radio. And with us, as we promised, is the guest of the evening, the one, the only, Mr. Robert Salas. And, Robert, welcome to Skywatchers Radio. It's such an honor to have you on here, man. We've been, both me and my co-host Alan, been looking forward to having you on the show for a long time.
Fantastic. No, I'm happy to be here. Anxious to get on with the show. You bet.
Now, you wrote a book called Faded Giants that was co-authored with James Klotz, which detailed your own UFO incident while stationed at Maelstrom AFB in Montana. Let's start off with your background a little bit because, for the audience that might not know or be or aware of your history and your story, I want them to know Robert Salas. So let's go into your background and what happened to you with this incident.
Okay, sure. Graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1964. I spent 7 years active duty and then resigned from the Air Force 71. Worked for Martin Marietta, Rockwell International for a couple of years. Did a little bit of space shuttle design work and then went to work for Federal Aviation Administration as an aircraft certification engineer in structures, aircraft structures. Got a master's degree in aeronautical engineering, and then after my 22 years of FAA, I retired from federal government service and went to work as a teacher. I studied for a teaching certificate, and I've been teaching high school math for about 15 years now. So, and in the interim, I wrote these two books, Faded Giant and Unidentified, the UFO Phenomenon. The Faded Giant book described in a lot of detail my incident in 1967. That was when I was a missile launch officer in control of 10 nuclear missiles, part of a two-man crew. March 24th, 1967, we were on duty at Oscar Flight, which is an underground facility in control of 10 nuclear missiles. These were Minuteman I missiles. We had 6 guards upstairs. We were in an underground hardened capsule. We were locked in overnight and not allowed to leave until we were relieved by another crew. Obviously, we had control of nukes, and we didn't want anybody else going in there.
So you would hope, yeah.
Yeah.
So on this particular evening, early morning, I don't remember which, but it was dark outside. I get a first call from the security guards saying that they've been seeing strange lights in the sky, flying very fast, stopping on a dime, reversing course, and then they were not making any noise, and he said that they couldn't possibly be aircraft because of the way they were moving. He just wanted to report it. I didn't know what to say. I kind of dismissed it, and then about 5 minutes later, he calls back, and this time he's obviously frightened. He's screaming into the phone. He says he's got all his guards out there with their weapons drawn, and they're looking at a glowing reddish object, pulsating light. It seemed to have some kind of oval shape in the middle of the light, but he couldn't make out the structure. It was about 40, 50 feet long. But it was just sitting over the front gate, and they were all scared to death. They didn't know what the heck this thing was. They wanted me to tell them what to do next. I told them, make sure nothing comes inside the fenced area. I was kind of shocked. I didn't know exactly what to think of this, except that I knew he was frightened, and so frightened that he had all the guards out with their weapons. So I thought that we might be under some sort of attack. And so he hung up the phone. I went to wake up my commander, who was taking a rest break, and just as I was about to tell him about the phone calls, we get a little bells and whistles in the capsule going off. We look at our status board. shows the status of the missiles, and they all went from green to red. In other words, they were unlaunchable. They were incapacitated while this object was still up there. So now we had all the controls for the missile underground. They had no ability upstairs to instigate any kind of a hoax. So we reported this to the command post back at Malmstrom, which is about 100 miles to the west. And they told my commander the same thing happened at another flight. Now, at that time, I thought he meant the same thing happened that evening. But after I got some documents from the Air Force, I realized that this happened a week earlier. So that was the Echo flight incident. Echo flight, very similar to our flight, another 10 missiles. They had UFOs sighted over their facilities, their launch facilities, where the missiles are actually located about a mile or two away from the launch control center. So, and they had guards, they had maintenance people out there that saw UFOs at the time of their shutdown. They lost all 10 of theirs. So that happened a week earlier. So within the span of about 8 days, we lost 20 nuclear missiles during UFO sightings.
Did they ever come back online, or they were just done and drained of energy, or what?
No, not automatically. This had nothing to do with draining them of power energy. It had to do with upsetting the guidance system. We had a way of querying the system, and we got guidance and control system failure on each of the missiles.
Did they reset after the UFO was gone, or they stayed that way?
No. They don't reset automatically. This is an inertial guidance system, which means that once the guidance system is upset, it's got to be manually reset. So we had to send maintenance teams out there, and so it took approximately a full day. They were all still down when we got relieved the next morning, but we had maintenance crews out there going through a kind of an involved process of reorienting the missile and
okay,
going
now,
through.
Can I ask a question or two?
Sure.
If the guidance system is screwed up, does that mean their GPS coordinates were screwed up, or it couldn't reach the GPS satellites, or was it a magnetic interference? Was it, what was the not the source of the malfunction? It might have been the UFO, but what was the diagnosis of the malfunction?
Okay, well, first of all, we didn't have GPS in 1967.
Well,
that's a good point. That's a good point. Wow.
Hold on. I'm not so sure about that. To the public, you might be right that we didn't have access to it.
That's another good point.
There were military satellites up there that had GPS coordination since what?
They
had the internet since when? The 70s?
Like, I'm not going to argue with
66, you. There were satellites up there being able to, that were in geosynchronous orbit, in 66, that were able to guide missiles in.
No, sir. You'll have to do your research. Anyway, I'm
going to go with his word on this one.
Any conspiracy theorist that's listening to this?
I'm going with Robert Salas. He seems like he knows more than you about this. I'm just saying.
I know nothing.
Continue, Robert.
I hear nothing. I see nothing.
Let me just say this. Inertial guidance system. I've got the procedure here. I've been through this. I've talked about this for 20 years. Plus, I went through all the training. But
how long have you been talking about it, Alan? Huh?
But basically,
he's got tenure. I'm not going to argue with him.
All right, go ahead,
Robert. Basically, what has to happen is they go through what's called an alignment procedure. They actually shoot the stars and go through. That's how they determine how to orient the missile. It's a very involved procedure. Like I said, it's called a targeting and alignment procedure, and it has to be done physically. We had no GPS. Take my word for it. We had no GPS at the time. If we did, we would have used it. this was a manual procedure that had to be done to each missile separately. So that's why it took so much time.
Oh.
Okay, but basically, to answer your question, what this object would have had to do was send a signal through 60 feet of earth and concrete, penetrate triply shielded cables, triply shielded against electromagnetic interference. Obviously, we didn't want any kind of VMI sending signals to our missiles, so these cables were, they had triply shielded systems. Anyway, they would have to send a signal to what's called the logic coupler, which is basically an interface between our equipment and the computer that launches the missile and keeps the missile on course after launch. So this was a very intricate system. I mean, they would have had to do this to each missile separately. Now, one of the documents I received from the Air Force under the Freedom of Information Act actually stated that the possibility of this happening is extremely remote. Because
didn't something like this already happen in Rendlesham?
No. Rendlesham, they didn't have any missiles at Rendlesham. They had nuclear weapons there. But what happened there was a UFO comes over, or multiple UFOs actually, and sent a beam of light into the weapons storage area. That's where the nukes were actually kept. And my understanding is that one or more of the weapons were damaged and returned back to the States. But
it's always UFOs and nukes. I don't know what it is.
We've had.
Well, it makes actually perfect sense, Alan. If you think about it, what's one of the most dangerous things men's ever created? Nuclear weapons.
Oh, I thought you were going to say religion, but okay.
Well, that's the second most. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, we're not jaded at all, folks.
No.
And if you have a comment and you want to call in, by all means, go ahead.
By the way, open lines, if you guys want to call in, 786-245-8127. All questions, of course, will be answered by Mr. Robert Salas if you ask, so please go ahead and do so.
Well, hold on. Only if the questions are directed at him, obviously.
Obviously, yeah.
Okay, you got to point that out sometime.
Now, moving back on track here. To continue with what we were saying about the incident.
Well, again, after we reported it, we just had to wait for the maintenance crews to go out there. We were relieved the next morning. I went up and talked to the main guard, and basically asked him again what this thing looked like. And this, what he described to me was what I told you. It's about a 50-foot in diameter, oval-shaped.
How far away was it from you?
I'd say less than 100 feet from the guard shack to the front gate. And then immediately we were ordered back to the base and ordered to our base squadron commander's office. And in there was a member of AFOSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigation, along with our squadron commander. He was white as a sheet. I asked him, what the heck's going on? And he said he didn't know. He had no idea what had caused the missiles to go down. And then they shoved a piece of paper in our faces and told us to sign here. It was a non-disclosure statement about this incident in particular. And we both signed it. And basically it said we were never to talk about this under some severe penalties. So it was highly classified at the time. And
would doing this show now, will it get you in trouble? Because,
no.
I've been killed,
I've been talking about this for 20 years now. And
what lifted that as a problem? Because, that's a pretty big problem.
Well, I don't know. Is there a statute of limitations on the National Securities and Secrecy Act?
No. No, there is not. But let me just go. Well, there are statutes saying that after a certain number of years, some classified material can be declassified. That's basically what happened. In 1994, I was, of course, out of the Air Force. I was studying for my master's degree in education and at the University of Washington. Happened to be walking through their bookstore and picked up a book called Above Top Secret by Timothy Good.
Good book, yeah.
A good book.
Great book.
Yeah.
And if you turn to page 301 of that book, you'll see a short paragraph stating that UFOs were involved in missile shutdowns in Malmstrom, Montana in 1966, I think it says. Anyway, I got kind of excited. I thought it described my incident, so I thought, well, hey, maybe the Air Force has declassified this. So I took a chance, talked to James Klotz, who was an investigator from MUFON, and asked him to send a FOIA request to the Air Force asking for information about this incident. I told him, don't say anything about UFOs, just ask for information about this particular incident where missiles shut down for no apparent reason. And
right.
Sure enough, the Air Force wrote back and said, this is classified. However, we're going to declassify it because it's been over 12 years, and we'll send you some documents. So they did. They started sending us documents about what turns out to be the Echo flight shutdown. Now, that's the one that happened about a week earlier from ours.
Okay.
So, but I thought it was mine. I thought it was my incident. See, let me just back up. I hadn't talked to anybody about this for some 20 plus years, almost 30 years. And so I forgot some of the details. I forgot where I was located exactly and things like that. So, and from time to time we did substitute in other squadrons. So Echo Flight was part of the 10th Squadron. I was part of the 490th Squadron. And anyway, I thought this was my incident, so I started talking about it as a UFO incident since the Air Force had declassified Echo. Well, after a couple of years, I finally located my commander, Fred Mywald, and he told me that, no, we were not at Echo, we were at Oscar. So by then, I'd already spoken out on television and radio, and so I decided just to keep talking about it. I've been talking about it ever since. I've never had any hassle from Air Force or anybody else about speaking about this.
You know, Robert, I've heard from other folks in similar positions that the government doesn't really come after people anymore. Not like they used to back in the day, where they were, threatening people, and that stuff just doesn't happen anymore. I mean, do you find that?
Well, I think it depends. I've heard from other people that say that they have been threatened, and I've talked to people. One of the people I spoke to, I wrote about his story in my recent book, and that was the Ellsworth Air Force Base case, 1976, and he asked to remain anonymous because he fears for his life if he talks. He really does. Anyway, I don't think they came after me at all because I was so outspoken. I had been outspoken. I've spoken all over the world now and all over this country. Written 2 books, and so they're not about to come after me now.
Do you think, though, that some within the government are, in a way, hoping that disclosure happens and that the truth actually gets out to the public and that everybody knows? Do you think that there's a portion of the government that knows the truth of what might be happening and they actually want this out?
Yes, I do. I really do. I think there are many individuals, let's say, a large number of the people that know this phenomenon is real. Mm-hmm. They've experienced UFO sightings, and many of them up close and personal, let's say. And yeah, they'd love to see the truth come out. But like I put in my book, I think there's a secret cabal or a secret group that's holding this information, and they're using things like that document I had to sign, for example. There's also to keep people quiet, right? But there's also something called the Personnel Reliability Program in the missile field in the Air Force, where if you report something unusual like UFOs, for example, it goes on your record as a black mark.
Which is so silly.
Yes.
It really is.
Right.
I mean, what do you want people to lie about, having something happen to them? I mean, it's so silly. It really is. But I mean, not only have people, had people within the government approach them when they've come forward, but, some people have actually been killed in the past. But that stuff, I mean, that rarely does happen anymore. But you said that it still does happen. I mean, what reports have you gotten in the last few years that we haven't heard of?
Well, this is just talking to witnesses, people that, like I mentioned, this one witness who came forward was a highly credible guy. But part of this has to do with keeping your job, just staying employed, such as Air Force pilots. Civilian pilots and Air Force pilots, running to, maintain their careers, things like that. But I have talked to people that are frightened of their safety.
Really?
I mean, I've heard reports where pilots who come forward have completely lost their entire career just from one report.
Yeah, I think so. I think that happens. Anyway,
that's shameful that would happen. But I mean, let
me ask you a question. Let
me ask you a question, because I've come up with a theory in the last 7 years of researching ufology, and my theory has to do with Tesla and UFOs and the Nazi UFOs. I do think there's some truth to the Nazis have been working on some UFO technology.
What, the Hanabu and some of those other things?
Some of that other stuff, but I've also been doing a lot of research in the last year on Tesla and what he was working on, and I've come to a certain conclusion that perhaps what we've seen in the last 50 years, this phenomenon that's called ufology or UFOs, has to do with the engineering that we did back when we inherited all these scientists from Nazi Germany and then used the technology that Tesla had. If you guys Google Tesla UFOs, there's a whole lot of stuff on there on the internet regarding this stuff. But supposedly the story goes that technology came from aliens directly to Tesla and to the Nazis, which either way goes back to space aliens. Do you think there's any truth to that at all, Robert?
I doubt it.
Well, there goes that theory.
It's just my opinion.
Whoops.
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
A little more echoey. Go ahead.
It's just my opinion. I know that I've seen that material about the Nazis. I've seen the comments of Tesla saying that while he was working on one of his experiments, he felt that he had been in contact with extraterrestrial beings.
Yeah, I mean, he had schematics of what looked like a flying saucer. He called it Tesla's flying saucer, and I mean, this looks like the modern-day flying saucer. It really did.
Yeah, and after he died, in his hotel room, all of his papers were taken.
Well, here, do the math for me. Let's do the timeline here for a second, real quick, Robert. We have 1943, the death of Nikola Tesla, right? 1943, he died. And a couple of years later, we have the end of the war, right? That we inherit all these Nazi scientists into the U.S. program through Operation Paperclip. Mm-hmm. What happens a few years after that? Roswell.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
big one, right? The big one in ufology. Now, follow along here. If you're engineering some kind of new technology where it's maybe of alien origin, and you're really trying to get the kinks out and you're trying to work this thing and trying to make it work, if you're the U.S. government and you're doing this in secret somewhere in the Nevada desert, for example, couldn't there be a chance that maybe a crash or two could happen because it's new technology to us? It's possible.
Interesting thought.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think you're following the train of thought of a recent book. I forget
Oh,
the
tell
name.
me more.
Yeah, I forget the name of that book, but it's written by a woman who used to work for the LA Times. I know because she interviewed me at one point. But that's her theory. That is that the Roswell crash. Well, it's not a theory she came up with. She claims that she's talked to some ex-NASA engineers that have told her this, that the Roswell crash was actually
One of
one of
ours.
ours or one of the
Right.
Russians. You know, I'll tell you this. At first, when I started researching this, my own incident and other UFO incidents, I would just out of hand dismiss a lot of stories that I heard from different people because it sounded too wild, too irrational. But as the years have gone on, I don't dismiss them out of hand, and I wouldn't dismiss this out of hand either. But what I would say, what I'll say is that, okay, there's possibilities there, but unless you show me some good hard evidence, I'm not going to buy into it. Uh, so that's the way I operate now. And even though I said, in my opinion, I doubt that we have back engineered Nazi UFOs. That's just my opinion, but I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm not going to say it's there's no truth to
Well,
it because
my
I
theory
can't say
doesn't
one way or the other.
my theory doesn't include them actually having a built UFO, but maybe schematics for one. They were maybe working on one, but they hadn't actually gotten to work yet. But they were on the on the verge of making this thing work, making it real, and that's when we went in and cleaned house. And to me, that would make sense that they wouldn't have built the thing because if they would have had working UFOs, I mean, that's a game over right there for the U.S. I mean, there's no way we could win at that point.
Well, also, if we had built working UFOs, we would have made them operational by now. I think. I mean, just think of the the aircraft, the advanced aircraft that we have disclosed that we have in our inventory now.
Oh, there's all kinds of different black budget projects that are out there that are really alien looking. I mean, for a long time, the stuffed bomber was considered by many to be a
Yeah.
UFO. They didn't know what it was until it was declassified. I mean, that happens a lot. And how
Yeah.
much of the technology jumps that we've had in the last 60,
Yeah.
70 years have not been because of whatever technology we inherited, found
But
out through whatever means, you know?
what I'm saying is we would have made them operational. They would have been used in the Iraqi wars, things like
Perhaps, yeah.
that. Yeah.
Perhaps. So you don't think the U.S. has anything back engineered hidden anywhere?
No, I didn't say that. I do think.
So what are you saying, Robert? Because now I'm confused.
All right.
Or what can you say and what can't you say?
Exactly.
Well, I have evidence, or I have a strong evidence, let's say, that we have back engineered the technology and at least built experimental craft that operates somewhat like UFOs. But
Well, let me ask you, do you think the Solar Warden program and some of these other possible off-world or breakaway civilization things exist thanks to that, or not a part of, or does it not exist at all?
uh, I kind of missed those terms. I'm not sure what those terms are again. Would you repeat that?
One more time, Alan. Go ahead.
I'm just curious if we've back engineered anything, do you think that what's your opinion on what's called the Solar Warden program that is supposed to be a multinational, or at least originally U.S. based patrol fleet that actually flies throughout the solar system.
I don't know anything about that. No, I don't even know what it is, frankly.
Okay, never mind then.
Is that the cigar-shaped UFOs space fleet you're talking about?
Yes, that's
Yeah, I
some of
remember
it.
reading
Yeah.
about that. That's interesting. Yeah, but that's if he hasn't read about that, it's
But
No.
I'm saying if he
baseless.
knew about the back engineered technology, maybe.
I have evidence that we have back engineered technology. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no doubts in my mind that there is back engineered stuff. And look, there's reports that I've read, Robert, that we're maybe 200, 300 years more advanced technology wise than we let on. And I'm talking about we, meaning the government. Now,
Possibly.
if that's the case, I mean, that's scary to think of some of the stuff that's there that we're not using. Which begs the question: if they have technology that advanced, does this mean they've already conquered certain things like free energy, anti-gravity?
Oh, I'm sure of that.
So
I
why
would
are
think
we not using those technologies? That's the question here.
because they need to sell the oil to make money to fund these projects.
That's what it always goes back to, making the money. But that's another thing, though, guys. Even if they do change to another power source, I mean, who's not to say there's not going to be new enterprises that are going to be making money off of it? There's going
If
to be
it's
companies
free,
making a ton.
if it's free, it's
Nothing
free.
is really free. The term free energy really is not free. It means it's not draining the resources out of the planet free. But the generators are going to cost some money. If it breaks, somebody has to fix them, right?
No, you're right. 100%.
How is this energy going to be produced? It has to be a machine that produces it. There has to be a station somewhere that powers this thing out to the people.
No, you would
So, I
hope.
mean, there's nothing that really is going to be free about it. There's a big misconception about the whole term free energy. Really, it's not free as what you might be thinking free. Unless it's wind energy and you have a big propeller in the background. That might work.
No,
Is everything okay over there, Robert, in the background? Because
Yeah, everything's fine.
I thought maybe we were being abducted on live radio for a second there.
No, I'm here. I'm just listening because I can't confirm any of this business about free energy.
You will neither confirm nor deny it, in other words.
Exactly.
But doesn't it make sense, though, that there is really no such thing as free energy, even if the technology to make
sure.
energy like that,
That's
viable?
absolutely. Nothing's free.
Yeah, somebody's going to get paid. But somebody's pocket's going to get fat. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I agree.
Now, Robert, you said you have a new book in the works here. What's the name of this book you have you're working on?
No, it's been published. But actually, I'm going to write another book. But the book I recently published, it's been out about a year now anyway. It's called Unidentified, the UFO Phenomenon. And in there, I basically talk about my 20 years of experience in researching this field and talk about, again, the issue of nuclear weapons. Because I think my incident in particular was, and other similar incidents, point to the fact that these ETs, if you will, are very interested in our nuclear weapons and nuclear energy sources.
Now, have you come to the conclusion that these things are ETs that are being seen on these nuclear facilities?
There have been many sightings.
Besides yours, there's been a few others.
Besides mine, right, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but are we convinced, though, that they're alien in nature, what we're seeing?
Well, I'm convinced because of, again, the way these craft operate. We have nothing. I've studied aircraft all my life. We had nothing in the inventory at that time or now that could do what these objects did with regard to the missiles.
Good to know.
So if they're not built here, where are they built?
Well, let me ask you then. What do you say to the abduction phenomenon and to the supposed deal that the U.S. government has with the aliens where they allowed them to abduct a human beings. What are your feelings on that?
Now you're mixing a couple of subjects. First of all, the abduction phenomenon is real. I experienced my own abduction, and I can talk about that. But whether or not the government is involved in working with ET on abductions, those are called MILABs, or military abductions. I have no evidence, or nor do I believe that. So I don't ascribe to that theory.
Okay.
But the fact that people are being taken by extraterrestrial entities is, to me, an established fact. I'll tell you my story. So, what I know about it. 1985. Now, this was after my incident, but before I went public with my UFO incident. I was living in Manhattan Beach with my wife and two small children in a particular house, I recall. And one evening we were all asleep, and I suddenly wake up and I notice that there's a bluish light coming from the living room area. I wake up my wife, and she also sees the blue light. I tell her I'm going to get up and investigate, and so I start to get out of the bed, and I am paralyzed. I can't move. Now I struggled and struggled, and so this is the first reason I'm convinced this was real and not a dream, because I remember struggling with every ounce of energy I had to try to get my mobility back. I yelled out to my wife, and she was unconscious at this point. So next thing I recall, seeing a hooded figure in the doorway. And I was also aware that there were others in the bedroom. I can't, at this point, recall what any of these beings looked like.
But you felt a presence in the room,
yes,
basically.
I felt their presence in the room. And in fact, I thought these others were childlike, because they were small in stature. The next thing I remember is being lifted off the bed, kind of floating off the bed, and being guided towards the bedroom window, and specifically thinking that I had locked that window, and they don't know how to open it. But as it turns out, they took me right through the window. I know how crazy that sounds. It sounds crazy, but that's what I've been able to retrieve. And I've been through 4 hypnotherapy sessions where I've retrieved some of this information. Anyway, I go right through the window. Next thing I recall, I don't remember a craft overhead or a light or anything, or being taken up. The next thing I recall is being like a metal table, ostensibly inside a craft. But I was being shown a long needle. They actually placed this, what looked to me like a very long hypodermic needle in front of my eyes, so I could, to be sure to see it. And communicated with me that they would insert this into my groin area, and it would not hurt. Well,
I doubt that very much. Yeah.
I'm not putting money on that one.
Yeah, that just sounds painful.
Started to do this, and it hurt like hell. It really was very painful. So that's
I believe you.
Second reason this was not a dream, because I still remember that pain. It was excruciating pain. And, when I objected, the pain went away almost immediately. But so that was that. Basically, next thing, I was taken through this curb tunnel, escorted by 2 of these beings. And again, we weren't walking; we were kind of floating through this tunnel. And all of a sudden I'm back in my bedroom. The next morning, I didn't remember any of this.
Did you have any markings on your body at all?
And I don't recall looking at my body because I didn't remember any of this. My wife didn't remember any of this. We didn't talk about this until I think it was 2007.
Oh, wow.
So this happened in '85, and we didn't talk about it until 2007. And this was after.
What brought it up? What brought up the subject in 2007 after such a long time?
What's that?
What brought it up after such a long time? What brought it up?
We were actually at a conference in Ireland, and they had some people speaking there that had experienced abduction, and so a couple of these thoughts came to mind. Some of the details I just mentioned, and I just happened to ask my wife. I said, "Do you remember back in '85, seeing a blue light in our living room?" And one evening, and I was going to go check on it, and she said, "Yes." And I'd never asked her that question before, but when she confirmed the fact that she had indeed seen that blue light, that's when I decided to go ahead and get hypnotherapy, and that's when I started recovering some of these memories. But
so from
to me, that was a confirmation again that this was not a dream.
But from '85 to 2007, it was just kind of like a blurry dream kind of memory.
Yeah, it was every once in a while I'd have kind of a flashback, but
okay,
I couldn't put it all together, and I didn't really want to. I didn't want to think that, man, was I really taken? It's pretty wild stuff.
What do you think the agenda is of the aliens with these abductions?
Well, I do think part of their agenda is to create hybrids. In other words,
okay,
part ET, part human. Now, what their objective is with these hybrids, I'm not sure. But, there's a lot of, let's say, testimony out there. I can recommend a very good book. Actually, it's called The Dual Soul Connection. That's by Susie Hansen. She's from New Zealand, but she's an abductee since she was about, I think, 12 years old. Through her 50s, she's been taken many times, but she writes a very good account of her experiences. There are other good books out there. Another one is The Andreessen Affair, Betty Andreessen Luca.
Yeah, they were on recently.
Okay.
Yeah, nice folks.
And her husband. I think they've got an excellent story, and I have great faith in the author of that book, Ray Fowler, who was instrumental in my incident. I can talk about that a little if you want. Anyway.
Between the squeaking of the chair, sure.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about it for a second. Go ahead.
Okay, Ray Fowler happened to be working for Sylvania Corporation in 1967 and had representatives at Malmstrom Air Force Base. They had a contract on the electrical systems. And so when the incidents occurred, he got the feedback that from these people there that this was indeed a UFO incident. Now, Fowler was kind of a follower of the UFO phenomenon at the time, and what also was going on in '67 was the Condon investigation, which you've probably heard of. Mm-hmm. And so Fowler contacted the Condon investigator, a guy named Dr. Roy Craig, and told him about the incidents at Malmstrom. Craig went out to Malmstrom, talked to the base ops officer, a guy by the name of Major Lewis Chase. Mm-hmm. Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Chase at the time. And asked him about this. Chase was shocked that he even knew about it because, of course, the Air Force wanted to hide all these things from the con investigators because they didn't want them looking into it. Anyway, he basically told Craig to go away, that this was not a UFO incident, and Craig dutifully went away, even though he had names and phone numbers of people to talk to and names of witnesses, all given to him by Ray Fowler. It wasn't, anyway, the Condon Committee goes and finishes their report and says there's nothing to the UFO phenomenon, and they didn't include my case because they never really investigated it. But Fowler in '73 gave a interview to the Christian Science Monitor, and they actually published it. And Fowler spilled the beans there, and that's how Timothy Good got a hold of the story from the Christian Science Monitor write-up in 1973, and he published it in his book Above Top Secret. And if he hadn't done that, so if Fowler hadn't gone, and Fowler was risking his job, pretty courageous for him to do this. If he hadn't done that, then I certainly wouldn't have read that, and I wouldn't have come forward with this. So Fowler's very instrumental. He's a man of great integrity. I have nothing but great things to say about Ray Fowler. So he lends a lot of credibility to the Betty Luca Andreessen affair.
Gotta talk to that man one day. Robert, it's been so much fun having you on. We're almost out of time. I wanted to give you a chance to tell the audience how to find the book, your website, and to keep tabs with what you're working on.
Yeah, I've got a website called spiralgalaxy.org. If people want to go to that and go to a link to my page, I think it's Unidentified, but they can see the evidence. There's another link to my evidence page, which shows much of the evidence that I have to support my incident. And you can also purchase my books from the website, and I'll sign them and send you a signed copy. Or you can go to Amazon.com. They're both on there. That's Beta Giant, and the other one is Unidentified, the UFO Phenomenon.
I got that one, by the way. Great book.
Thank you.
Good, it's a good book. It really is.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Forwarded by none other than Stanton Friedman.
Yeah,
that's right.
He's a great guy, Stanton Friedman.
Yes.
Yeah,
Robert, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much, and we got to do this again soon. You're a wonderful guest. You really are. I appreciate your time, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Thanks,
Have a great night.
You too. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Robert Salas, squeaky chair and all. Fun guy, though. I mean, a great story. If you could get past the squeaking chair, it's actually a fascinating UFO story. And this is what does it for people. When you have your own personal encounter, no matter what it is, it kind of changes the game for you. Even though I will say this much. Part of the abduction part of his story really reminded me of sleep paralysis.
I might lean a little bit toward. I understand where you're coming from on it.
Because I suffer badly from sleep paralysis, and so far, I've been told you should really see a psychiatrist and see if have some hypnotherapy and see if maybe you've been abducted. You have sleep paralysis happen so much. I haven't gone that far, but maybe one day I will. Don't think I've been abducted yet, though. Kind of looking
that
forward
you know
to
of. You need that past. You need that regression, man, to figure it out.
I'm looking forward to the experience. That's all I'm saying. Maybe not the probing part, but look, I'd love to meet aliens. I mean, man, I've said it a billion times. Knock on my windows. Just knock on my window, guys. I'm here for you. I really am.
Actually, it's the other way around. They're here for you.
Unless they're going to eat me, then don't knock on my window.
But Soylent Green is people!
Crickets?
Crickets? Okay, fine. So it's the to serve man cookbook again.
Yes. Crickets.
Yeah, no one called in. I'm just so like, wow. What happened to everybody?
Does it shock you, man? I don't know what happens.
I'm a little bit bothered, but
I'm a little bit upset by it. We give the number out 3 or 4 times. We had an epic people like Nancy Burns and Robert Salas on, and I don't know what's going on, but
we had a nice sized guest list. Every week we have some great guests.
Every week we do have some great guests.
Yeah, what are people waiting for to call in? I'm so
I don't know. Maybe next week they'll call in, because next week we have another really fantabulous guest.
Fantabulous, not just fantastic.
No, he's fabulous.
Fantabulous. Okay, who is it?
Frank Joseph is going to be on the show. He's the author of a bunch of books. It's a ton of. He's written. Man, this guy's done a handful of books, and a lot of them have dealt with Atlantis.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about Atlantis next week. Also, ancient America.
Okay.
Because that's a hot topic which we don't cover nearly enough. And, it deals with
I'd agree to
that also. So, good stuff. Anyway, guys, we got to go. It's unfortunately that time of the show where we got to sign off and say goodnight. So stick around with Dark Matter Radio Network and PSN. There's a lot more stuff coming up next week. Be here for Frank Joseph. It's going to be fantabulous. And please call in. Now, the podcast will be available within probably 20 minutes on skywatchersradio.com. So everybody listening in, if you want to download the podcast, go to the website. Again, it's skywatchersradio.com. And you can sign up for the website also, which is really neat. It's free sign up. Sign up on the WordPress. You sign in, you create a user account. You can participate with us on the website. By the way, the website is looking great, Alan. I don't know if you've seen it recently.
Not this week.
I must say the webmaster who's working on it is amazing. This person.
Okay.
Just amazing.
Who is it that's working on it?
Me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm amazing.
Okay.
It's a good-looking website.
Right. I won't argue with you. No problem.
Skywatchers Radio out. We'll be back next week, everybody.
Have a great night to all.
Aeronautical engineering, and then after my 22 years of FAA, I retired from federal government service and went to work as a teacher. I studied for a teaching certificate, and I've been teaching high school math for about 15 years now. So, and in the interim, I wrote these 2 books, Faded Giant and Unidentified, the UFO Phenomenon. The Faded Giant book described in a lot of detail my incident in 1967. That was when I was a missile launch officer in control of 10 nuclear missiles, part of a 2-man crew. March 24th, 1967, we were on duty at Oscar Flight, which is an underground facility in control of 10 nuclear missiles. These were Minuteman I missiles. We had 6 guards upstairs. We were in an underground hardened capsule. We were locked in overnight and not allowed to leave until we were relieved by another crew. Obviously, we had control of nukes, and we didn't want anybody else going in there.
So, you would hope, yeah.
Yeah.
So on this particular evening, early morning, I don't remember which, but it was dark outside. I get a first call from the security guards saying that they've been seeing, and they all went from green to red. In other words, they were unlaunchable. They were incapacitated while this object was still up there. So now we had all the controls for the missile underground. They had no ability upstairs to instigate any kind of a hoax. So we reported this to the command post, back at Maelstrom, which is about 100 miles to the west. And they told my commander the same thing happened at another flight. Now, at that time, I thought he meant the same thing happened that evening. But after I got some documents from the Air Force, I realized that this happened a week earlier. So that was the Echo Flight incident. Echo Flight, very similar to our flight, another 10 missiles. They had UFOs sighted over their facilities, their launch facilities, where the missiles are actually located about a mile or two away from the launch control center. So, and they had guards, they had maintenance people out there that saw UFOs at the time of their shutdown. They lost all 10 of theirs. So that happened a week earlier. So within the span of about 8 days, we lost 20 nuclear missiles during UFO sightings.
Did they ever come back online, or they were just done and drained of energy, or what?
No, not automatically. This had nothing to do with draining them of power energy. It had to do with upsetting the guidance system. We had a way of querying the system, and we got guidance and control system failure on each of the missiles.
Did they reset after the UFO was gone, or they stayed that way?
No. They don't reset automatically. This is an inertial guidance system, which means that once the guidance system is upset, it's got to be manually reset. So we had to send maintenance teams out there, and so it took approximately a full day. They were all still down when we got relieved the next morning, but we had maintenance crews out there going through a kind of an involved process of reorienting the missile. And
okay, now,
through...
Can I ask a question or two?
Sure.
If the guidance system is screwed up, does that mean their GPS coordinates were screwed up, or it couldn't reach the GPS satellites, or was it a magnetic interference? Was it, what was the not the source of the malfunction? It might have been the UFO, but what was the diagnosis of the malfunction?
Okay, well, first of all, we didn't have GPS in 1967.
Well,
that's a good point. That's a good
well,
point. Wow.
Hold on. I'm not so sure about that. To the public, you might be right that we didn't have access to it.
That's another good point.
There were military satellites up there that had GPS coordination since what?
They had the internet since when? The 70s?
Like, I'm not going to argue with
66.
you.
There were satellites up there being able to that were in geosynchronous orbit. In 6.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Skywatchers Radio right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network and, of course, PSN Radio. And with us, as we promised, is the guest of the evening, the one, the only, Mr. Robert Salas. And, Robert, welcome to Skywatchers Radio. It's such an honor to have you on here, man. We've been, both me and my co-host Alan, been looking forward to having you on the show for a long time.
Fantastic. No, I'm happy to be here. Anxious to get on with the show. You bet.
Now, you wrote a book called Faded Giants that was co-authored with James Klotz, which detailed your own UFO incident while stationed at Maelstrom AFB in Montana. Let's start off with your background a little bit, because for the audience that might not know or be or aware of your history and your story, I want them to know Robert Salas. So let's go into your background and what happened to you with this incident.
Okay, sure. Graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1964. I spent 7 years active duty, and then resigned from the Air Force 71. Worked for Martin Marietta, Rockwell International for a couple of years. Did a little bit of space shuttle design work, and then went to work for Federal Aviation Administration as an aircraft certification engineer in structures, aircraft structures. Got a master's degree in strange lights in the sky, flying very fast, stopping on a dime, reversing course, and then they were not making any noise, and he said that they couldn't possibly be aircraft because of the way they were moving. He just wanted to report it. I didn't know what to say. I kind of dismissed it, and then about 5 minutes later, he calls back, and this time he's obviously frightened. He's screaming into the phone. He says he's got all his guards out there with their weapons drawn, and they're looking at a glowing reddish object, pulsating light. It seemed to have some kind of oval shape in the middle of the light, but he couldn't make out the structure. It was about 40, 50 feet long, but it was just sitting over the front gate, and they were all scared to death. They didn't know what the heck this thing was. They wanted me to tell them what to do next. I told them, make sure nothing comes inside the fenced area. I was kind of shocked. I didn't know exactly what to think of this, except that I knew he was frightened, and so frightened that he had all the guards out with their weapons. So I thought that we might be under some sort of attack. And so he hung up the phone. I went to wake up my commander, who was taking a rest break, and just as I was about to tell him about the phone calls, we get a little bells and whistles in the capsule going off. We look at our status board, shows the status of the missiles.